Hey there, I'm BreaCheese, and this is my complete Next Angel of Death guide for beginners. Next Angel of Death, or often called AOD, is a really fun and great introductory boss into group PvM. Out of all of the available bosses in the game, I feel that AOD is a fantastic starting boss because it's not very difficult after a few tries, and it'll get you used to trying out roles at group bosses since pretty much everyone on an AOD team will be doing some kind of role. Group bossing can often feel a bit intimidating if you've never tried it before, but if you give it an honest go, you just might find it becomes your favorite kind of content in the game. AOD can be done with practically any group size you'd like. However, there are upsides and downsides depending on how big of a team you take. AOD has a unique loot system where it ranks players based on how well they perform during the kill. There are two separate drop tables that you can receive rewards from based on this. The main table, which is the one that has the opportunity of rare drops, is rolled for the base tank and the top 6 DPSers on the team. Anyone past that receives loot from the secondary table, which has worse loot and also no chance of rares. The drop rate of rares for people with the chance to roll them also changes based on the amount of people on the team. With the drop rate increasing, the fewer people there are. The drop rate of rares also significantly decreases if you have more than 7 people on a team. Because of all this, most players will opt to do 7-man teams, which has the benefit of everyone rolling from the main drop table and also keeping the drop rate of rares at a reasonable amount. More advanced players can also go for even smaller teams, and inexperienced teams can opt for larger teams to practice. But as an introductory guide, we're going to be covering 7-player teams. Speaking of loot, AOD has some really nice and sought after drops. The first one is the Praesul codex, which allows you to unlock one of the tier 99 prayers when used. AOD also has the Praesul wand and Imperium core, which are tier 92 wand and orbs, and currently are the strongest ones in the game. There are also 4 extremely rare intricate chests, which unlock some cosmetic overrides. Next, we'll cover the requirements and recommendations for fighting this boss. You'll need a set of ancient ceremonial robes, or need to have unlocked the permanent ability to skip kill count for next. Technically, you can gather kill count to access this boss, but no team is going to be interested in waiting for you to gather kill count, so the ability to skip kill count is definitely a hard requirement. AOD has some DPS checks to meet and also high defense, so you're definitely going to want at least tier 90 weapons along with tier 95 prayers and overloads. You'll also want to bring along a shield if you're going to be basing or minion tanking. You'll also want at least one player that has a Statius Warhammer to help reduce AOD's defense, and you'll also need at least one person with chins to help AoE her minions partway through the fight. Both of these are important enough that they can be considered someone's role if they're doing it. Next is my list of recommendations to bring. Not everything here is necessarily needed to be able to complete kills, but the more you have, the easier time you'll have. The first thing on my list is Dominion Mines. Now, I don't personally consider these to be a hard requirement, but they are heavily recommended, and on many teams, they will be required to join. They play a big role in reducing the amount of time you need to spend dealing with one of the mechanics, which is why they're rather important. Dominion Mines are also used in quite a lot of group situations, so I'd very much recommend unlocking them if you haven't already. Because of AOD's high defense, you'll want to be using the Berserker Aura for your style. These auras offer the highest accuracy boost and will help increase your damage greatly. If you still find you're having trouble with accuracy, a Nihil can always be a good choice in familiar, but I'd personally prefer to bring a Ripper Demon here. While you're learning, it can be fine to bring a Pack Yak for extra supplies, but it won't take you very long to get to the point where you're using hardly any food at all. Both the Power Burst of Vitality and Power Burst of Acceleration can be handy for allowing you to solo a couple mechanics that normally require multiple players to complete. Bladed Dive is also very handy here since the arena is quite large and you will be needing to move around it a lot during the fight. The Storm Shards and Shatter abilities are great to bring here for one of the DPS checks during the fight, and they'll make your kills much smoother if your team is struggling on DPS. Flanking is nice to have here since there will be multiple opportunities to take advantage of it. Most teams will have a player bring along a combat dummy to build adrenaline before the fight starts. Boom bombs are always an easy include and should definitely be used since it will benefit the entire team. I'd also highly recommend getting the Alt-1 toolkit for this fight if you don't have it. This is an extension you can get that has various apps for helping you out with information when playing the game. It has an extension that can read the game chat and will keep track of the order that the minions die in, which is necessary information during the fight. It's also a lot easier to have this track that for you instead of trying to read the chat in the middle of a kill. There are a few different roles needed when fighting this boss. The first one is the base tank. The base tank's job will be to hold the aggression of AOD and also to lure her around near the end of the fight. As a base tank, you'll be dealing with the most amount of damage and you'll also need to perform prayer flicking. It's not too difficult with some practice, but it is definitely the most challenging of the roles. During the fight, next will end up spawning 4 minions, and for each minion there'll be a player who's a minion tank. Even though the role is called minion tank, don't worry about having to do some kind of tanking rotations. It's more just that you need to lure a minion rather than tank it. Since more than half of the players on a team will be a minion tank, I personally like to have learners learn this role first. It's a really easy role to learn, and it's good to know since there isn't really room for more than 1 or 2 people to be a free DPS on a team. Because of this, you shouldn't be joining an AOD team with the expectation that you'll only be DPSing. If you're wanting to mostly be a free DPS, you'll either want to be the person using a Statius Warhammer to apply debuffs, or be the chinner whose job it is to AoE down the minions after they've been lured by the minion tanks. If there ends up being room for someone to just only be a free DPS, I personally like to have that person on debuff duty so they're still contributing as a role. Now let's take a look at the fight itself. I'm gonna go through the fight first from the perspective of a minion tank, since that's likely what you'll be doing if you're learning. Afterwards, I'll go over the differences when doing other roles. The arena itself is divided into 4 quadrants, 1 for each of the minions. The southeast is Umbra's Shadow Quadrant, the northeast is Glacies' Ice Quadrant, the northwest is Cruor's Blood Quadrant, and the southwest is Fumus' Smoke Quadrant. Depending on which minion you're tanking, you'll be staying in that quadrant for the beginning of the fight. At the start, you'll want to be standing right on the edge of your quadrant on the green ring around AOD. You don't want to be right on the dividing line, but directly next to it, and which side you're on doesn't matter. Before the fight begins, if you have Dominion Mines, you'll want to drop them in this position on your quadrant, then head back over to your spot. Someone will likely have placed a combat dummy, and you can use it to start building your rotation. I like to start off with a Natural Instinct, which doubles your adrenaline gain temporarily, build to my ultimate, and then shortly after, the fight should have started. Once Nex comes down, begin to do your usual damage rotations. She attacks with both melee and magic, but only the base tank will be dealing with the melee attacks, so you can just pray mage. Shortly into the fight, she will jump up into the air and then face one of the quadrants, while at the same time dividing the room along the quadrant lines. If she faces your quadrant, you need to prepare to take 3 large hits of damage. You can use any defensives you'd like to reduce this damage, such as Resonance, Disruption Shield, Reflect, Debilitate, and so on. If you're not in the quadrant she faces, a Blood Reaver will spawn and start to walk towards her. The Blood Reaver is what the Dominion Mines are for. When the Reaver reaches AOD, the entire team will be dealt damage based on how much health the Reavers have. If everyone has Dominion Mines, they will deal enough damage to be able to ignore the Reavers entirely. If you didn't have Dominion Mines, you'll want to do a bit of damage to your Reaver to reduce its health a bit. Throwing a couple bleeds can be a great way to do this. Make sure not to stun the Reaver though, because if it takes too long to reach next, it can restore all of its health. Since not having Dominion Mines means having to stop attacking the boss momentarily, this is why on many teams they will be required. After the Reaver's mechanic, the goal is to get her down to 2.1 million health as soon as you can to begin the next phase. If the team takes too long, she'll begin to do her Shadow Orbs attack, which, after 3 hits, will place a damaging orb where each player stands. It shouldn't be too difficult to phase her in time, and as long as all 3 hits aren't done, they won't spawn. If the orbs do end up spawning, you just need to move off of that tile to stop taking damage. Once she hits 2.1 million health, she'll begin to spawn an Amalgamation amalgamation for each quadrant. When each amalgamation spawns, it will deal an AoE hit around it, which is why you started off to the side instead of in the middle. While the amalgamations are spawning, AoD will be invincible, but still targetable. This is the time that you want to apply your storm shards if you have them. This next part is the main part of your role as a minion tank. Wait for the amalgamation to finish spawning, then immediately move to this specific tile next to it. The amalgamation will have a progress bar depleting under its health, and your job is to kill the amalgamation before this bar depletes. Killing it in time will cause your minion that spawns to spawn with half health, so it's very important that the amalgamation dies in time. If you're struggling, just dump whatever you can to make sure it gets killed in time. Once the amalgamation is dead or the bar runs out, your minion will spawn behind you. Because you're standing on this specific tile, it will make sure that you are the closest person to the minion when it spawns. And because of that, it will automatically aggro onto you. Wait for your minion to attack you so you're sure it's aggroed, and then you take one step forward onto the green line and surge. Do not move from the spot that you land on. This will place you to the exact opposite corner of the ring and will lure your minion underneath of AOD so the chinner can AoE it. Once you've lured your minion, just begin to attack the boss again, and that's pretty much it for your role. While your minion is still alive, it will still be attacking you, and it can also stun you, so just be mindful of that. When learning, there's a decent chance that your lure might get messed up for one reason or another. If you see that your minion is visible and not standing under AOD, your lure failed. If this happens, it is absolutely crucial that you re-lure your minion. One of the biggest mistakes I see new players make here is not reluring their minion. It's not a big deal if your lure gets messed up, but it is a big deal if you don't fix it. Reluring is very simple. Just make sure you're still in the green ring attacking AOD, and just surge back across to the other side. There are usually just two reasons why your lure might have failed. The first is that you did your movement incorrectly. If this is the case, just make sure to reposition yourself onto the green ring before reluring. It doesn't matter which corner you surge from, so there's no need to run back to the other side again. Just do the lure from the side that you're on. The second reason your lure might have failed is because your team's DPS was too low. During this part, the team should be trying to get AOD down to 1.8 million health to begin the next phase. If this is done too slowly, she will redo the jumping mechanic from before. When she does that mechanic, she actually becomes impassable, which means you're unable to lure minions under her. If this happens, you need to wait until she finishes the mechanic before reluring. Keep in mind that if she repeats this mechanic, whoever is in the quadrant she's facing will be taking the 3 hits again, and more Reavers will spawn if the team still hasn't gotten her to 1.8 million. This DPS check is where someone should shatter any storm shards that have been stacked up in order to help reach 1.8 million as quick as possible. After all the minions are lured, it's the job of the chinner to use AoEs to kill the minions. The order that the minions are killed in should be noted, as it will affect how the final phase is approached. At this point, everyone's job is to DPS AOD down to 600,000 health in order to start the final phase. While this is happening, there are a few random mechanics that AOD can do. These don't happen to every player, so you won't necessarily have to deal with these mechanics personally each kill. The first mechanic is her smoke blades. 2 random players will be targeted for this attack, and a message will pop up on your screen saying that the smoke is being drawn to you from the north or the east. After a short while, a line of smoke similar to the fire from Vindicta will be placed across the arena, either vertically or horizontally where you're standing, depending on the direction that you got. If you get this mechanic, first type either N or E in chat so people are aware that smoke is about to be placed on you. Then you'll want to position yourself in a way where you're not placing the smoke on any of your teammates. An easy way to do this is to take a few steps back from the ring, since everyone should be inside or on the ring. Once it's placed, make sure to move off of it yourself. Another mechanic that she can do during this part is unstable smoke. A small cloud will come out from AOD and spawn a purple shimmering circle with a pedestal in the center. A couple teammates will need to stand in this circle and then click on the pedestal to tank some damage. This will deal 14,000 damage divided by the number of people in the circle, which can easily be tanked by a few people or even soloed with a vitality potion. If this isn't done, instead Instead, the team will be hit for 37,500 damage divided across everyone. Basically, if this spawns and it's near you, just hop into it to help tank the damage. Don't forget that someone needs to activate it by clicking on the pedestal, or else it won't actually go off. The final mechanic she may do during this part is her Icicle Slam. This will randomly target one player on the team, and you'll get a message saying ice begins to form around you. If you get this, first type I in chat so people know ice is about to surround you, and make sure you're not standing too close to anyone. Shortly after, ice will shoot up around you and damage anyone too close. There are two ways to deal with this mechanic. The first is to just have your teammates destroy the ice to free you. If you have Bladed Dive and a Power Burst of Acceleration, you can actually free yourself from this mechanic. To do this, you first need to use Freedom when you first get the message that you're being iced. Then, you need to wait until the icicles spawn, after which you can drink a Power Burst of Acceleration and Bladed Dive out. Either way, it's an easy mechanic to deal with. Once AOD reaches 600,000 health and all the minions are dead, the final phase begins. In each quadrant, there's a pillar that needs to be destroyed. These pillars need to be destroyed in the order that the minions were killed. Each of these pillars also has a mechanic associated with it that can be applied to you while you're within AOD's auto attack range. The Umbra Pillar will start to spawn shadows under your feet, which will deal large typeless hits if you don't move off of them. This is the most dangerous of the pillars. The Glacies Pillar has a chance to apply an icy effect to you. If you see this, you only need to use Freedom to clear the effect. This mechanic takes a rather long time before it actually does anything to you, so if your Freedom is on cooldown for any reason, don't panic, as you will have enough time for it to come off cooldown. Just make sure to remember to use it once you can. If you fail to clear the effect, you will take several large typeless hits until you clear it. While this pillar is still active, AOD's auto attacks will also bind you if you're not praying magic, so be mindful of that. The Cruor Pillar lets AOD heal from her auto attacks while it's up and isn't much of a concern. And the Fumus Pillar will occasionally drain your overload timers and prayer points and also isn't too much of a concern. Because some pillars are more dangerous than others, it's ideal to make sure that Umbra is the first minion killed, ideally followed by Glacies second, then Cruor, and then Fumus. If the minions aren't killed in this order, it's not the worst thing, but it is very beneficial to make sure that at least Umbra is killed first. While killing these pillars, the base tank will be luring AOD over to the last pillar that needs to be killed. You should make an attempt to hug the walls furthest from her when killing the pillars so you're out of her auto attack range. Successfully being out of her auto attack range disables her from applying any of the pillar's effects onto you, which will make things much easier. While the team is going around destroying the pillars, AOD will continue to target random players with a new mechanic, Mark of the Elements. If you're targeted, a message will pop up on your screen indicating this, and a progress bar will start to fill above your head. At this part of the fight, there will be a large glowing circle in the center of the arena, and you'll need to be standing in this circle when the progress bar fills up, otherwise you'll be dealt an insta-kill. After you've negated the insta-kill, a second progress bar will begin to fill up. This one will place a bomb wherever you're standing once it fills up. You'll need to place this somewhere that isn't going to disrupt the team for the rest of the fight, such as a pillar that's already been destroyed. Just try to use your best judgment when placing these. The bomb's damage is also limited by being within AOD's auto attack range, so more advanced players may drop them onto the DPS pile as long as they're out of the attack range, since it will have no effect in that circumstance. Once you're more comfortable with the fight, this is a good strategy, but while learning, I'd recommend avoiding this. After all the pillars have been defeated, all that's left is to finish off AOD, and congrats on your first kill at AOD. If you're doing the chin roll, your job is simple, and you just need to use chins to deal AoE damage after the minions have been lured. If you're doing the hammer roll, your job is to make sure the Statius Warhammer debuff is kept applied to the boss. Next, I'll cover the base tank roll. This roll is a bit more complicated than the others, but it's also not too difficult with a bit of practice. It'll be your job to start the fight by clicking on the orb in the center of the arena. You want to make sure you're positioned directly next to where she spawns, because you want to keep her in the spot she spawns in for the entire first part of the fight. As the base, you're going to be taking both melee and magic hits. The way these attacks are done is a bit odd, because her melee attack will hit instantly, but her magic attack has a delay. Because of this, you need to always switch to pray melee whenever she's about to attack, just in case it's a melee hit. But then if it's not, you just switch to pray mage. This can be a bit weird to get used to, but it will make sense after some practice. Ideally, you'll also want to use Soul Split in between attacks as well to keep your HP up. You'll also be gaining Enrage stacks throughout the fight, which cap out at 15. These increase the damage dealt to you by AOD, but it should be manageable with good prayer flicking. For most of this first part, you just need to do your prayer flicks and DPS. Keep in mind you may still get hit by her targeted random mechanics. If you get the smoke lines, make sure to type which direction you're getting so people can move aside. Then you'll need to wait until the smoke is placed and move off of it. If the minions haven't been killed yet, you'll want to move to another adjacent spot to AOD so you don't move her. If at any point you accidentally move her off center when the minions are still alive, the trick I find best to recenter her is to blade a dive to the opposite side of the center from where you currently have her. The wiki explains that you can also step onto the center tile and then move to the opposite side that she ends up on as well. If you get the ice mechanic, you can clear this the same way as normal. If you see the shadow circle, just ignore this as the base. If it happens to spawn under you, you can either prepare to also take a hit or just carefully move out of it. Once AOD reaches 600k and the pillars part of the fight starts, you need to lure AOD to the last pillar in the Minion Order. If you just run straight there, she'll still be far away from the pillar, which isn't ideal. Instead, what you're meant to do for luring is to first head towards the final pillar. I like to get there quickly by using a bladed dive as soon as she hits 600k health. I also try to anticipate sometime while she's under 700k HP so I don't get bound as she phases if I don't happen to have Prey Mage up. Then you want to run along the wall to one of the adjacent pillars, ideally the one that isn't where the team is going second. Running all the way over to that pillar will pull AOD along the wall and far away from the team so they aren't within her auto attack range. Then you'll run back to the previous pillar and then about halfway towards the other adjacent pillar. If done correctly, this should position AOD close to the final pillar. During this part while the team is killing the pillars, AOD will be invincible. Because of this, it's fine to shield camp and rotate defensives to reduce the damage you're taking. Also, keep in mind that because you're within the auto attack range of AOD, you will always be at risk of the pillar mechanics while each of them are alive. Once the team is heading to the final pillar, you'll want to first help the team finish that pillar off. After it's dead, you should move to the opposite side of AOD to have her facing away from the team. This will allow your teammates to use their flanking switches for the rest of the fight. As the base, you can also have the insta-kill and bomb mechanic applied to you during this part, and if that happens, just deal with it as usual and just do your best to reposition AOD for the final part. And that's really it for basing here, so make sure to give it a go if you're feeling up to it. It can definitely feel like there's a lot to take in at first here, but since most of the mechanics during the fight are applied to random players, you honestly won't be dealing with many of the mechanics during any individual kill. And after you've done a few runs, you'll be having a blast and enjoying a super cool new boss. Good luck and I hope you enjoy. I'm also happy to take learners along when I go on my iron, so if you'd like to join in sometime, make sure to drop by my stream on Twitch under the same name as my YouTube channel, BreaCheese. Thanks for watching and I'll see you there.